On December 19th, in the email from the NRA, I read that the Senate had passed the NICS Improvement Act, and that after months of negotiation, pro-gun legislation had passed Congress, even going as far as to say that it was a win for American gun owners. Then I received an email from another pro-gun organization, the Gun Owners of America. They described H.R. 2640 as a stab in the back from Congress and the NRA, implying that a phony compromise is about to become law. Could this be the very same H.R. 2640 that the NRA was endorsing in their email just the day before? I found their difference of opinion troubling. How could two pro-gun organizations have such different views on the same thing? So I decided to go to the Library of Congress website and do a search. Following the links, I found a location from which I could download a PDF of the bill. With a copy of the bill in full, I could read for myself how it compared to the claims of the NRA and what its critics were saying about it. The NRA calls it pro-gun legislation and also calls it a win for American gun owners. The bill's chief sponsor, Senator Chuck Schumer, is quoted on CBSNews.com as saying, "This bill will make America safer without affecting the rights of a single law-abiding citizen." However, opponents of the bill are saying something completely different. The GOA is calling it the Veterans Disarmament Act. With even stronger language, they say you can dress up a pig, but you can't make it sing, also calling it an anti-gun travesty. They go on to say that there are intentional tricks in the language of the bill, also claiming that this bill would statutorily impose a lifetime gun ban on battle-scarred veterans, troubled teens, and ailing seniors, based solely on a diagnosis of a psychologist as opposed to a finding by a court. That hardly squares with claims that it's pro-gun legislation, or won't affect the rights of a single law-abiding citizen. The JPFO, outraged by the NRA's support of it, claimed that the NRA assisted in the passage of a law with the potential to strip hundreds of thousands of military veterans of their basic right to own and carry weapons. The GOA asserts that the core of the bill's problems is in Section 101C1C, which makes you a prohibited person on the basis of a medical finding of disability. Let's see if that's true. I looked at my copy of the bill and went to Section 101C1C to read it for myself. In general, no department or agency of the federal government may provide to the Attorney General any record of an adjudication or determination related to the mental health of a person or any commitment of a person to a mental institution if the adjudication, determination, or commitment, respectively, is based solely on a medical finding of disability, without a finding that the person is a danger to himself or others, or that person lacks the mental capacity to manage his own affairs. This must be one of the intentional tricks in the language of the bill that its opponents are concerned about. In the GOA's point-by-point response to proponents of H.R. 2640, Mike Hammond, the GOA's legislative counsel, points out that with post-traumatic stress disorder, kids with attention deficit disorder, or seniors with Alzheimer's, diminished levels of danger or incompetence are almost always an underlying issue, and hence an implicit finding. He also makes note of the use of the word federal. State diagnosis in connection with IDEA, Medicare, or State National Guard would be enough to make veterans, kids, and seniors prohibited persons, even without meeting the diminished danger standard in 101C1C, which is applicable only to federal diagnosis, not state diagnosis. So, what can make you a restricted person? Anyone who has gone through a life-threatening event could develop PTSD, including combat or military exposure, experienced as a child sexual or physical abuse, witnessed a terror attack, been the victim of sexual or physical assault, been in a serious accident such as a car wreck, or suffered in a natural disaster such as a fire, tornado, hurricane, flood, or earthquake. That sounds like just about everyone. There are also questions as to who can adjudicate a person to be mentally defective. Title 27 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 478.11 states that the adjudication may be made by a court, board, commission, or other lawful authority. Lawful authority. To see if that was true, I looked up Title 27, and that was exactly what it said. Who could this lawful authority be if not a court? with all the mention of mental illness, that lawful authority could presumably be a state-sanctioned psychologist. In a society where over-medication is rampant, where antidepressants and selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, have been linked to increased risks of suicide and violence, yet are handed out like candy, I'm really not sure that letting psychiatrists and psychologists decide what my rights are is in my best interest. In an article titled Over-Medication, a Growing Crisis, Lou Dobbs points out that from 1998 to 2002, sales of antidepressants increased 73% to more than $12 billion, and sales of analeptics, drugs that stimulate the central nervous system such as Ritalin and Adderall, increased 167%. There are peer-reviewed studies linking antidepressants to increased risks of suicide and violence. Even the FDA has proposed that makers of all antidepressant medications update the existing black box warning on their products' labeling to include warnings about increased risks of suicidal thinking and behavior. Remember that part in the bill where it states that they cannot use a medical diagnosis unless there is a finding that the person is a danger to himself or others? Now imagine having suffered the loss of a close friend or relative and being depressed about it. Suppose you were to go to a doctor and get some pills to help you deal with your loss. Simply being prescribed the medication would prove that you have an increased risk of being a danger to yourself or others. So it would seem that between being diagnosed with PTSD or taking a pill prescribed by your doctor and the very loose language of the bill H.R. 2640, just about anyone and everyone in America could potentially lose their Second Amendment right to bear arms. In their rush to pass legislation that would prohibit law-abiding citizens from owning and purchasing firearms, a few serious issues have been overlooked, and another issue is exposed. If you want to know more about it, I would suggest that you go to the Library of Congress website at thomas.loc.gov and download a copy of the bill. Visit the Gun Owners of America at gunowners.org and Google antidepressants and violence. As for myself, I'll be withdrawing my membership from the NRA and donating my money to a no-compromise organization like the GOA.